I do want to point out the fire exits in the back here, in there, and actually behind us as well. So if in the case of a fire, you know how to escape. I'm going to move on to a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting. Mary Caitlin, Brian. Which moves us swiftly into, oh, whoops, sorry. All in favor? Aye. Which makes us move on now to public comments. I'm not gonna read through the whole thing. I think Brett's gonna click on it and bring it up, but just a reminder that to keep your comments kind. Oh, don't name people in a negative way. And I'll be reading each person before they come up to the podium and their address. And then Pam will be taking that information down. And if there's anything you want to hand to us, you can give it to Pam over here as well. So, am I forgetting anything else? Is it up? There we go. Okay. Thanks for being here tonight. I know it's a really busy time of the year as well. So, and it's a beautiful night. So I told the board I'd try to be a taskmaster. We'll see. So our first speaker for tonight is Doug Willard at 7 Chadwell Circle.
No, you don't need to have it right now. Hey now. All right. Jim voice, turn that down. And I'm on the clock. Good evening, board members. I'm Doug Willard again. Glad to speak with you again this evening and grateful this meeting to begin with. I'm sharing some copies of posts from the Facebook page, A New Fairport Track, which has been our major way of getting out information and educating the community about our feelings towards our aging track. In relation to that, we've had 14,700 people reached since March 2nd when the page went live, and 7,500 engagements, and now 186 and counting followers. Our top post has 5,717 views, and it was titled The Hoped For Future. The second highest had 3,968, and it was about our deteriorating track. These are multimedia posts, so there's, of course, images that accompany a lot of them. 2,088 people viewed the telling Monroe County track chart, which, going away from what I prepared, has all of the Monroe County tracks listed and the facilities they have and don't have. And that's important when the track and field organization looks to the future and schedules invitationals, sectional level competitions, and even regional and state level competitions for our athletes. And Fairport was the only school that had no in 3 of the major categories for that. The Access for All post, which is one that shows there's a brother in a wheelchair of an athlete that's competing, and the 6-foot window that he has to be able to see his sister compete. That Access for All post had 1,462 views with 1,740 impressions. Now, I'm not a social media giant, but impressions are multiple views by the same person. So there were people that viewed that one more than once. The largest age group of people that viewed our page, A New Fairport Track, fall in the, and I've combined this grouping, but 35 to 54 age demographic, and that's 82% of the viewers. And many of the posts that I referenced are included in the packet I gave you. Changing gears, I'd like to consider what a new and improved and reimagined track facility would mean, not only to the track and field teams, but to the other school sports teams as well. I was recently at Penfield High School in support of our varsity track team, and Penfield has a unique setup. Many of them, and there's a post that covers it on our Facebook page, are facilities that were thought out in a way that they have a track around a multi-purpose field and a grandstand there, which certainly seems very efficient. For whatever reason, in 2003 and then in 2007, when Fairport went through facility improvements here related to those things, that didn't happen here. I can't help that. But at Penfield High School, they've got a side-by-side facility similar to what is possible here in Fairport. And at Penfield that evening, they were running the Fairport versus Penfield track meet, but also on the actual stadium turf field, shared by football, soccer, field hockey, and lacrosse, was a 7th and 8th grade modified field hockey game, a game made remarkably better when it's played on turf.
10 seconds.
Wow. Let's see. Last night I had the chance to attend to that for my own daughter here, and because of seasons being done for our other Fairport schools, it was possible here, and it was neat to see. In closing, I echo comments from our last meeting. 140 athletes are on this track team, and every single one competes at every meet. Nobody sits the bench. I also see a way forward for a community track and a community field as well. I think that that's a great asset and a great selling point. The last thing that was said by a student athlete was, if not now, then when? Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. And I should have reiterated that it is 3 minutes, and I will try to stick with that, even though it's very hard. So, and I know last month, if folks are listening in at home, because it is live stream, we did have a number of students and community members that spoke about the track as well, and we just wanted to continue the conversation and gather more information for us and for the community as a whole. So it's kind of a continuation, but thank you. Next, we have Steve Radnicki at 120 Crossover Road.
Thank you. I'm the husband of a Fairport teacher and a father of 4 amazing Fairport kids. My kids are involved in just about everything Fairport has to offer. When I'm not driving my kids around, I manage an engineering firm. I inspect buildings and write reports, and the end result of my inspections is a priority list of repairs. Priority 1 is safety issues that need to be fixed right away. Priority 2, fix very soon or they will become a safety issue. And 3 and 4 and down the line. We then discuss alternatives with building owners and options and alternatives. My somewhat rhetorical question to the board, you have a track that was substandard when it was built, is now at a priority 1.5, I'd put it. I personally have pulled my daughter out of jump training from impact injuries, and visiting coaches have done the same. And you have a track surface that is not far behind. If the new track does not go on the ballot, what's plan B? While you consider that, I'll add some of my own experiences. My non-paying career is coaching youth sports. I've been coaching now for the past 7 years. I love coaching. I take joy in seeing my players gain confidence. I take joy in seeing them improve from one play to the next. Early on, I received some advice. Don't coach so they win at age 9, coach so they win at age 13 and up to varsity. Sounded great. I took that advice and I ran with it. Fast forward 7 years and seeing many of my past and current players navigate Fairport High School team sports, I would change that advice, or I would at least adjust my perception of what winning at U13 and up to varsity means. Why? Because contributing a member on a school team in a school the size of Fairport takes one of 2 things. Either you have to be a 1 in 100 athlete, or you have to live and breathe that sport to make a varsity team someday. I've seen my players get unequal playing time on Mod B and Mod A levels. I've seen my players cut from JV and varsity teams. I've seen them drop out of sports entirely because winning meant making these school teams, and without it, only a small percentage of Fairport students can truly contribute to a team sport. As a coach, it breaks my heart. My thoughts on winning in youth sports has changed. Track and field is the biggest contributor to my change of heart. If you go to a meet, don't just watch the top athletes, watch the opening heats and the kids that are getting lapped in the mile. Regardless of placement, they are wearing the Fairport jersey with pride. They are working toward new personal records every time they step on the track. My personal favorite, they have teammates getting warned by PA announcers because they are too close to the track, cheering them on. And how great is that? If that's the worst thing a teenager does in the day, we're doing okay. They are competing, proud to represent Fairport, making a difference on team regardless of placement, making lifelong friendships.
10
and
seconds.
Those important social connections. They are out there winning, and there were 140 of them this year. So I'll ask my engineering question again. If the new track does not go on the ballot, what's plan B? Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And I'm looking to see if she is here. Our last person is Meredith Stockman Broadbent, but I don't see her either. Okay, so I think that wraps up our public comments. Thank you. What? I didn't know if I could move on. So next, we did ask if the coaches for both the boys and girls track team would mind talking to us today as well. So I'm not sure who would like to go first. So Coach Christy Moore, thank you.
All right. Good evening. I'm Christy Moore, the Fairport Girls varsity cross country and track coach, and I'm a 2003 Fairport alum. Thank you for having me here to speak. I would like to begin not by talking about why we're all here, but about where I should be right now instead. Where I should be is at practice, with my girls preparing for our state qualifier meet that's being held in 2 days. It's the biggest meet of the season that's the gatekeeper to the New York State Championships. I should be there helping them to prepare both mentally and physically for this challenge. Instead, I am here begging for a facility. You should please know there's nothing more I can say here that I haven't already told you. As a recap, earlier this spring, my first email shared my embarrassment and shame that we have the worst facility in Monroe County. I described the moldy mats, the crumbling track with only 6 lanes, jumping pits filled with the wrong sand, and a lack of stands, lights, and steeplechase barriers. My second email reaffirmed all this information with a comparison chart compiled by our Monroe County chairman. Like I said, ours is the worst facility in the county. My third email expressed concern that the Hilton coaches didn't want to compete at our track. How could my athletes train and practice every day in a facility other coaches didn't want to compete at for a few hours? My fourth email outlined, bullet by bullet, all of the issues with pictures of our current facility. There were 13 noted problems, but I could have continued, for these were problems that ruled our facility unfit for competition at our senior night, forced us to forfeit 27 points before the meet even began, and problems that jeopardized the health and well-being of our athletes. These are problems that have already led a junior class campaign by athletes on the team, hoping and praying that we will run all away meets next year, and they will have their senior night at any other facility but ours. You've also heard from athletes, parents, coaches, and alumni, all sharing their concerns, highlighting our large team, 140 on the high school team alone, filled with kids of diverse backgrounds, highlighting our success, including a sectional team title this season for the first time in 14 years, and highlighting the shame and disappointment of how our athletes are held back by our lack of facilities. How many missed opportunities for success at sectionals and beyond have our kids missed out on because of the dismal conditions? More important than wins and losses is the student-athlete experience and their well-being. Both are currently being negatively impacted by our unfit track and field facility. Fairport Track cannot continue with our current situation. You have all the information. You must act with urgency. A track needs to be included on the fall facilities vote. If you choose not to, that is a travesty for our kids, for our program, and for the future of Fairport. Thank you. 2 minutes, 57 seconds.
And Coach Ben is up next.
All All right, hello Board of Ed, and thank you for the opportunity to speak again. For those in the audience that may not know me, my name's Ben, and I'm an alumni of Fairport Track as well as the current boys track and field head coach. You'll notice that we don't have the full presence of our student athletes today. They've been at the last couple of meetings, but they're out practicing. I've already spent some time talking to you about what we don't have and what we aren't able to do, so at the risk of being repetitive, I'll give you some insight into what we do end up doing at our practices. We compromise. Instead of jumping all of our practices, our athletes spend considerable time raking and turning over our pit. Instead of throwing for an entire practice, they have to squeegee the throwing pad anytime that it rains. While we're doing this, the other teams in the section are practicing. Fairport is not a district that makes compromises. We take pride in our ability to provide the best opportunities for our students. Like I talked about last week, track is the largest, most diverse, and most accepted group of athletes in our district, as we don't make any cuts. They do not deserve to compromise. Another point that we have not yet brought up about in this conversation is hosting invitationals. Not only is this an exciting opportunity for our athletes to compete on their home track, but it's an opportunity for teams and booster clubs to make money. Between concessions, t-shirt sales, entry fees, track invites generate thousands of dollars in a single day. Money like this can be put towards uniforms, warm-ups, recovery snacks, fueling, tents, equipments, or celebrations for our very important student athletes, like our banquet at the end of the year. This is an opportunity that we do not have because our facility does not meet the criteria for hosting an invitational. So you know where I stand. Christy stands with me. But the track isn't for me, and it's not just for Christy. It's for the whole community. Here are a couple quotes from our community members that have been left as comments on the Facebook page supporting a new track. That would be great to have at Fairport. That was a response to pictures of the Rush Henrietta facility. A former athlete and current resident said, I can remember throwing in 2 inches of water back in 2003. Hopefully we can make a change. Another comment, disappointing for these athletes that jumps were not able to compete at a home meet. This was following us hosting Hilton, where jumps were not allowed to compete because of the conditions. Regarding accessibility, one resident commented, I'm in my 87th year, and that hill will be very scary when I get older. I would love to see a new track and an easier walk. The list goes on. You can check it out yourself. I encourage you to. Christy and I are speaking today, advocating for our student athletes, in part because it's our job, but we're not the only ones advocating. Community members are speaking their minds as well, and I hope that the board will listen. The movement has community support. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our public and coaches' comments. I did want to just pause for a second and see if any of our, before we move on to the official presentation and then discussion, I didn't know if anyone wanted to comment before we moved on. I will say, I think most people know where I stand. I have kids that do participate in track, so this has been a little challenging for me, but I'm just pleased with all of the information that the community has provided. Also understanding that there's other things in our school that need to be improved upon as well. I think someone said, if not now, when? There are things that need to happen, so I think most people know where I stand on that, but I know we're going to have more information as well before we discuss, but I did just want to see if anyone had any comments before we moved on. Okay. It's always a little awkward when we have comments and we have nothing to say back. So we are going to move on to our board discussion and action items. Letter A is the modernization of facilities.
We have a presentation attached to that. Yep, thank you. So I believe in December we had a community vote, and the vote went down narrowly by 49 votes. And from that point forward, you know, we did a lot of regrouping, and I really have to say that I appreciate the board's clarity, the board's patience, and willingness to give me clear expectations on how to proceed to put together ideas for this very moment relative to facilities planning and how we can create safe sustainable, effective environments for our students and community so everybody could be proud of them. And here we are, May 31st, and I appreciate the team that has been surrounded by this movement. Matt Stevens, Aaron Smith, Bob Clark, our friends from campus in La Bella, they're here. And we even have a great partner from Fiscal Advisors who you're going to be talking a little bit about. He's really important because he is going to help us talk about financing and the different costs associated with that. But not an easy feat. It took the clarity of the board. It took a focused and dedicated team. So thank you. I'm going to ask Bob Clark to sort of get in the on deck circle, and he's going to help with the first parts of this presentation. Troy, why don't you jump in too? Yeah, absolutely. You guys can all sort of stage up here. We're getting ready for the October 12th, 2023 referendum. We're looking at the first phase at this part of the meeting, right? There's two objectives, just so everybody has clarity on what we're trying to accomplish here tonight, what the board's trying to accomplish here tonight. And this is what they set out to do in January and in February when they directed me accordingly. But they're going to review and confirm the scope and the use of reserves for the 2012, 2020, 23 capital improvement project. Second thing that we're going to focus on is a potential resolution which will provide the superintendent, this happens to be me, with a clear pathway on how to proceed to develop a community referendum for the October 12th, 2023 capital improvement project. So we're going to be moving through this presentation with these two main ideas in mind. Reviewing and confirming the scope and the use of reserves, and the resolutions that are going to dictate to me a pathway forward. We are right on target. It's amazing how these timelines are formulated. I appreciate, of course, Lindsay Reddick, who's been behind so much of the presentation and the messaging and helping us stay clear with our objectives. Thank you, Lindsay. We're looking at our K-8 facilities planning. You can see that's happening right now all the way through August, partnering with our bargaining units. And then we're looking at initial seeker resolution, which Mr. Stevens is going to be talking about throughout this presentation. And that's happening June, July, and August for a potential Board of Education workshop on August 8th for more opportunities to hear community members, to process what we're about to embark on allowed within the community. A important meeting on August 22nd, which will be an actual business meeting. I can't believe we're talking about August 22nd. We'll be ready for school as well, but the board, if we continue to move on this path, will be having or completing a seeker resolution, which again will be explained. It's an environmental survey to, before you engage in any capital project. We need to have those pieces in place. Public informational meetings, and then a vote on the referendum. So those people that are here, the people that are viewing this on YouTube Live, this is important information. Get the word out, have people come, have them visit our facilities. As we move forward, they'll have clarity on to the extent.
Brett, if I just as a point of clarification, first of all, way to get rid of summer vacation and eliminate it already.
Well, thank you.
Jeez.
No, I would have to say thank you to me.
So just so everyone kind of is clear on the process, because it can be confusing at times. That now I'm going backwards. That August 22nd meeting, that vote, that is when we as a board will be finalizing the language of the propositions and of that. So we're kind of setting the direction tonight, and then that August meeting is when the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and we finally approve what's going to be on the ballot.
So you're marrying that wonderful the way you captured that to the second bullet there, right? Having that clarity and a pathway to August 22nd. Thank you.
And I was going to mention, Brett, if people are at home, you can see this from home. So if you look on Board Docs, there's a link on the website under Board.
Well, this presentation will be posted. It'll be visible and made public. Right now, it's being viewed, and then again, this will be posted online, so everybody will be able to see the presentation and details associated with it. So the goals of the first part of this presentation that Mr. Clark's going to jump in a little bit. It's about Fairport High School and Martha Brown. It's about modernizing our learning environments, no additional local tax impact after the use of capital building reserves we're going to be talking about, consolidating district properties, which means relocating staff from Balmer Place to Martha Brown and Minerva DeLand. There's about 30 staff at Balmer Place. As we prepare for the sale of Balmer Place, we need to relocate those professionals. That will include the staff members at Balmer Place, which are the directors, the instructional coaches, and of course the support staff who bring so much life to work. Right off the bat, Mr. Clark is going to be talking about the scope and the work that needs to occur here at Fairport High School.
Thanks, everybody. And I want to thank everybody that's here tonight to advocate for the track. I'm just going to start by also thanking the board and Brett. This process really started for us like 7 or 8 years ago, honestly. And I appreciate the view of a parent as a track dad myself, a student in another school, but understanding that my first house was built in 1854. And I started renovating by taking down one wall. And it took me 15 years. And when I left, I still wasn't done. That's how I very much felt about taking over as principal of the high school here. When I first came to FHS, it had been a building that hadn't been taken care of in a long time. And this board and Brett and the boards before and all of the leadership have spent years trying to thoughtfully plan for the renovation of the building. And I appreciate that the focus and attention has been on us for very much the reason that hadn't been touched in over 60 years. Many places, and I'm going to start with that in talking about the areas of focus for tonight. When we talk about the STEM edition and the library, these are two areas that have not been touched in a very long time. The STEM area much longer than the library, which has had a facelift maybe 30 years ago or so. So the primary focus of that, going back to the DAC and the building condition survey, sir, your role as an engineer, you spent a lot of time looking at those priority reports and fixing things that are behind the wall that nobody can see, and airflow and all those things, like you're speaking their language. We've spent a lot of time prioritizing that stuff. And one of the issues that we have, especially in our STEM classrooms, is that we have 60-year-old technology in those rooms and trying to teach our students modern technology courses and prepare them for college and the workforce. It's just not good. And so one way or the other, whether we had committed to the merger or not, that space needed to be renovated. One way or another, our library needed to be renovated, and that's what we were committed to. Along the way, we made the prudent decision as well to bring the 9th graders forward for all the reasons that the board has stated in prior meetings. But I just want to focus on that piece of things to understand that this has been thoughtfully planned out in a way that gets after some of the things that we really need done here at the high school. Starting with the library piece of things, our library, again, hasn't been touched in over 30 years. And one of the things that COVID shed a light on for us is that our students and our teachers teach and learn differently now. We are a one-to-one district by necessity, and that has impacted the way that we do research, and it's impacted the way that we use that resource. That's provided an opportunity for us, as we had already identified that space as a place that needs to be renovated. And so combining the need for renovation and the urge for the district to combine the 9th graders with the rest of the 10-12 building, the renovation of the library affords us the opportunity to pick up 3 core area classes at the same time as having a literacy-rich environment, which is something a library needs to be. As Brett talks about, a lot of times this is the heartbeat of a building, right? And we need it also to be a space for collaboration for students and staff, and that's something that we aim to do in this part of the project. So again, there's the added benefit of picking up and renovating this space and then picking up 3 additional classrooms. Another component of the library renovation that speaks to some of the needs that we have related to the merger is a space for our administrative staff that are coming up, not as a 9th grade, but as a 4th house. Those of you that may not know, we operate in a house system. We'll have students grades 9 through 12. We currently have the red house, the white house, and the blue house. We would be adding a 4th house at that time to have an equitable distribution of the students. And we need space for the administrators that would be there, the assistant principal. We have a philosophy on how we manage our students, and they are married to 2 school counselors as well as additional mental health staff. And so all of those individuals that are currently working at Minerva DeLand will move up to the high school, and they need a space to support students, and that would be part of that as well. So what we come out with on the other side is a library that's a little bit smaller, but still by county standards, a vibrant place, you know, a literacy-rich environment, but also gives us an additional administrative area for our school counseling and for those students to be supported, and as well as space for teacher collaboration and the additional 3 classrooms. And so that's what's highlighted in this rendering, this conceptual design right here. Here's some additional pictures that just kind of highlight some of the themes that have started in other areas that we started with, again, 7, 8 years ago when we first did the single point of entry and the different finishing touches, if you will, on the front of the building and the auditorium is consistent throughout the building, so we can modernize it. We still have aspects of 70s yellow and orange in parts of our building that we need to get after. They're less visible nowadays, but the library is one of those spaces. And so what you see there is something that we're really proud of, that our students had input in the conceptual design of it. We invited students down to Labella Associates and gave them an opportunity to look at things that they found inviting and that they thought would make for, again, that literacy-rich environment that we're going for, a space that they could collaborate with each other and with their teachers, and this is what they've developed so far. Again, this is just conceptual design. It's just a starting point for us, but that's what those pictures represent, and we're really excited about that. As I was saying, the other area of concern is our STEM classrooms. We currently have 3 STEM classrooms that service 11 different courses that range from architecture and robotics to traditional things like woodworking. And it's extremely challenging for us to implement things, modern technology, like 3D printers next to some of our more traditional technology, which is more how our wood shop, if you will, is structured. So many more of our classes, we're one of very few classes that offer a robotics course, for example, to maintain those kits in an appropriate place. You know, that's a huge need that we have. So anytime we bring in new technology, we have to consider what are we taking out, and also maintaining the validity of our programming, knowing that there will always be students that need and want to have access to that wood technology or to our auto technology, et cetera. So looking at this as a bump out, there was an opportunity, you know, looking at how, again, going back to the fiscal sustainability aspect of this, trying to take advantage of where we could get aid to modernize our building. This affords us an opportunity to do that. I won't get into the nuance of that. That's really Matt's territory. But the STEM bump out is an addition of 5 classrooms. And these spaces are intended to be flexible. You'll notice that there are 2 makerspace areas as well as more computer dedicated spaces. These are spaces that would not only be used for those technology courses that I mentioned, but also would be cross-curricular usage through things like our NASA class. And I have another slide that's coming here where I can show you the proximity to our science wing, where our NASA classroom is currently held. And it's an extremely unique elective course that we have, and very few schools in the country that have access to this program, where our students design and implement essentially solving problems for NASA with the opportunity of sending whatever they produce up into flight. And I wish I could describe to you exactly what those projects are, but it changes every year, and it ranges from things that people can do to store food, to socks, to tools that they use in space. And again, the challenging environment for us is that right now the technology could not be further away from the classroom that they use some of the tools that are found in a traditional tech area that are not as easily stored in a science classroom. So that's one of the cross-curricular purposes that we see in this, in the sharing of the space. The other, which is very obvious, and kind of I can illustrate a point for you, our art classrooms use, our art classes, digital art classes, share much of the technology that the technology teachers do with regards to drawing and design. And so using things like Wacom tablets and having that type of an interface, iPads to, iPad Pros to draw and that kind of stuff, is something that our architecture class can use at the same time as our graphic design or our graphic photo classes. And again, we don't have a space for that. They currently share our old-fashioned computer lab which is not really an ideal classroom. It's got some issues just structurally with the ceiling and the HVAC that runs through there. But they make do with what they have in order to deliver a really high quality programming in a substandard facility. We really don't have something like that. And so this space would afford us an opportunity to marry the technology, the computer technology, and the access to these things that we have to the programming. And that's really huge. So again, modern, flexible spaces, taking advantage of that opportunity to pick up the classrooms. There's also some ancillary benefits of moving out of the current technology wing. I'll just talk about that really quick as well. But first, just some conceptual drawings to show, and going back here again, I missed one thing. We also have no permanent home for our robotics program, which is very successful. For years, they've been housed over at Martha Brown, which creates a bit of a transportation issue for our high school students heading down there. Not those that can drive, but the remainder of the students. And so some pressure on our transportation, in terms of shuttling kids back and forth. Also issues there with maintaining the level of technology that they have, access to tools and that, which we have more of here at the high school. So one of our stated goals was to find a home, a permanent home, for our highly competitive robotics program. So again, this is just a rendering of what that might look like. And the idea is having more flexible spaces for our teachers. And again, our user groups, the technology teachers, our art teachers, our science teachers, our math teachers have all had a little bit of a say in this, and will continue to have a say in the development of the spaces to make sure that they align with the curriculum and their hopes and dreams for our kids. This is the latest version of this that Troy's put together and his team. It really looks fantastic, something that we can be proud of. I will share with you, like in the background, that is the current 400 wing that we identify as a 400. I know the numbers are confusing here. Those of you that don't know Fairport High School, they're not 4 levels, but back in the 80s, for whatever reason, that bump out was identified as the 400 area. So on the lower level is our art classrooms, and so they would be separated by a simple courtyard and a hallway. And again, that gives us the opportunity to share that space with art. And directly above them is our current NASA classroom, again, in the general vicinity. So the location of the STEM bump out is really attractive for us in terms of the curricular impact that it could have for both our staff and for students. So again, in sum, the one thing I hadn't highlighted in this is talking a little bit about some of the ancillary benefits. Moving out of the current technology space affords me the opportunity to bring my health classrooms, which are currently, again, could not be further away from PE. Health and PE go together. A lot of times our PE staff are also certified in health, and there is absolutely nowadays a use for having PE classrooms that actually have traditional classroom space. PE is not what it used to be. There's a lot of curricular components of that and actual teaching that takes place. And so bringing those classrooms down into that former space affords me the opportunity to do that and to align PE and health more closely, especially bringing up the 9th grade curriculum, which includes some leadership component training, which has always been a part of the curriculum in the 9th grade. A little bit more added focus on health, but it's embedded in their PE classes. So there's an additional pickup of 2 classrooms in that space. And then the other piece is related to special education services. So the special education program has certainly grown in Fairport over the years as a result of special education legislation and the changing population of our students. And part of the process in terms of renovating this building is making sure that we are up to code with regards to when we have a special education classroom, that we also have related service spaces. And so in the drawing, there are additional spaces that will be highlighted and reserved for these things. We're talking about OT, PT, speech, and also resource settings. And that also, all of these things contribute to making the move of the 9th grade students up into the high school that much more feasible. Right? So again, I think in total, I know one of the stated goals is the merger. I'm trying to underline and underscore the importance of a lot of this work needed to be done no matter what, and needed to be done no matter what the charge of the district was. And we're trying to do that in a way that's fiscally sustainable for the entire school community.
So we talk about flexible, modern, safe, engaging learning environments, and you stated and we've been speaking about these renovations need to occur, but also from a practical sense, adding these additional classroom spaces, the building is used differently. Can you take a moment and speak to, it's not the same building that was accessible in 1970, needs have changed.
I think one of the most common questions that we got is like, back in my day, Fairport used to have this many kids graduate. In my first year as principal, I had 568 graduates. This year, we'll probably have somewhere around the neighborhood of 420. And it just seems like a simple math problem. Why can't you just fit them in? And the reality is, as I was sharing earlier, our special education continuum has grown considerably. When I first got to Fairport High School, for example, there was no such thing as a special class, which is, and that program grew, so did their needs in terms of the building. And the days of putting special education classes in closets, which is unfortunately part of the United States history of special education, is no more. And those students deserve, those spaces. And as Brett usually says, we're very proud to serve our special education community. We've also seen an exponential growth in our E&L students. Again, as my first year of principal at Fairport High School, we had sort of a home base that was part of the library and was used a couple periods a day by a part-time E&L teacher that serviced both Minerva DeLand and Fairport High School students. I now have 3 full-time E&L teachers, and those teachers need a dedicated E&L standalone space to have sort of like a resource room type setting with those students, as well as opportunities to support those kids throughout the day, with language acquisition as well as assimilation into our school culture. And there's a diverse set of needs there. Those are 2 specific ways that have exponentially changed the footprint of the building. And then there's another related piece that I mentioned earlier in the very first project that I inherited when I came up, which was our single point of entry, which took out 3 or 4 of our English classrooms in trying to develop a safer building for students and staff and for parents to visit. And so all of those things, again, changed the footprint of the 80s when we didn't have as well, a strong a special education program. We certainly didn't have an E&L population to serve, and we didn't have those concerns about safety. So those things have all changed the footprint of our building. It's you guys, right?
All right, we're going to review the proposed construction timeline. Over on the right-hand side, you have an overview of the schedule for the project. As you can see, we capture the October vote of 26. Much of 2024 is going to be spent designing the project, getting SED approval. Shortly thereafter, we will bid the project in January and February. The construction will run from 2025 all the way through 2027. One of the areas we're going to concentrate on first is the STEM addition, starting that in spring of 2025. Because over on the right-hand side, we identify Minerva DeLand moving over in September of 26. So we are going to start that work first in order to be prepared for those students to move over. Library construction will go on 2025 through 2027. That's because we can't get it done all in 2 summers. We'll work with Bob, much like we did with the science classrooms, in order to continue construction while students are in session. Here, moving to the site work, again, you have the STEM addition starting in 2025. Then we move over to the tennis courts, which are also going to start in 2025. We got to get those prepared for the fall of 26 because we will take over the parking lot where the tennis courts currently are for temporary parking. We're also going to create another space for additional parking for increased accessibility to the sports complex.
Do you have a quick question on the
Yeah,
timeline?
sure.
It's a general one, but
Yep.
just that 2020, the kind of gap in 2024 when you're designing it and work with SED. I understand that that's a part. Can you just kind of talk about why that's such a long process? Just because that jumps out as that's a full year of. Short answer right now. It's okay.
Short answer is there is a period of time that we need. There's a period of time that we need to go through for design. It's usually can take from 6 to 9 months depending on the scope of the project. And then intrinsically at State Education Department, they only have maybe 4 or 5 fiscal associates that review projects as they come in. And you can imagine for the entirety of New York State, that's a big task for them. So there is usually a backlog of work that they have on their hands. There's usually 4 months or so of a review time at State Ed.
Thanks.
The next part of this phase or project, or the third goal, is the consolidation of district properties. Again, this is multiple years in the making, and this is just the board enacting on the vision that was set forth, I believe, in 2018 as we completed our strategic planning process. We plan on relocating the staff of Balmer Place to Martha Brown and Minerva DeLand. Can't get them there all at once or in one spot or in one place. We do have about 25 to 26 professionals in that building. We're a real live, high-functioning, dynamic organization. We're moving curriculum. We're providing professional learning. We're registering students. There's special ed services that go out of Balmer Place. And by the way, everyone's favorite topic, food and food service, is at Balmer Place. And again, we'll be talking about where those professionals all go in the near future specifically. But this was a very important part of our strategic planning process, and then eventually the sale of Balmer Place. Question?
Yeah, so if we're able to sell Balmer Place, what happens to the money from that sale?
Mr. Stevens, I'm going to let you jump in on this one.
So in selling any district property, we first have to then go look at, see if there's any outstanding debt on the property. That money needs to be backed out, placed into a debt service fund to pay off future debt, and then the balance of that can be allocated through a year-end fund balance to a capital reserve in that fashion. So as it relates to Balmer, there's just a couple of projects that are outstanding in terms of the debt on that. We replaced the roof as part of the 2015 capital project with the roof work. And then we had work take place at energy performance contract work as well at Balmer. I'm trying to remember, John, those are the two pieces, correct? Yep. So we'd have to work with our bond counsel in that process to be sure that we're following those procedures properly. If any funds were borrowed through the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, those may not be impacted because that's for aidable work as it is. So it's fairly minimal in terms of what could have to go into the debt service fund, probably under 40, 50,000, a real small mark overall. But really any debt we pay off through the years, that's the time frame we look at. So it's really 3 years out before we get to that step. So the dollar amount could be fairly minimal as a whole.
And then on that timeline, it's on the next slide with the Martha Brown slide, Brett. So if construction at Martha's 26, 27, it would be all offices, I assume, would be moved over there before we sell Balmer. So we're looking at a sale time of 27.
Correct. That's the anticipated timeline. And that's what, Troy, do you want to speak a little bit about what we're doing at Martha Brown?
So at Martha Brown, we've got a series of rooms that are on the lower level of the building. Unfortunately, they are below grade. They aren't afforded any windows, so by state law, we can't use them as teaching classroom spaces. So, with the exception of the ones at the end, but what it allows us to do is to create some professional development space for district use in the future. So we'll be converting there'll be some light reconstruction and some areas of more heavier reconstruction down there in order to fit out professional development space and space for more admin
So that
staff.
room on the end, a former technology classroom, there are windows in there.
Correct.
And we do plan on using that during the day for instructional purposes for students, large group instruction areas. And then by night, it will be a professional learning center for adults.
There you go.
Thank you. Troy, don't go so far. So I'll let you walk up here, but while you're doing that, I have to, again, the board is very clear on their expectations about making sure that we're attuned and tuned into sustainability features. And I know there's many realms of sustainability, but it's important that we highlight how we are trying to do this in a sustainable fashion.
Absolutely. So as designers, intrinsic to everything that we do, sustainability is a main tenet of how we approach our work. So there are three pillars that we kind of want to outline tonight. The first one, the main one, is generally what we think about is the reduction in energy consumption. You know, being proper stewards of our resources that we have. Here at the high school, one of the main resources that we are often short on when we think about projects, as we thought about, you know, where could we put an expansion, is just land space. For anything we do, it's always tight. It's whether it's parking, whether it's where we can fit out for building an addition. So we have to be good stewards of how we propose on expanding on our facilities there as well. There's also the environmental costs and impacts that we've got to take into consideration as we create new spaces. So we have to make sure that spaces that we create are high efficient, you know, proper insulation in the roof and in the walls. We also have to think about the materials that are used as well to make sure that they have a high recycled material content, that there are low VOCs. You have to take the health and safety of the occupants of the space into consideration as well. In addition to which, there are the energy components of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems that are incorporated in the structure. You know, low-hanging fruit are LED fixtures for low energy usage, low-flow water fixtures for water consumption, heat recovery air handling equipment. That's the kind of thing that gets Aaron very excited. High-efficiency motors. These are all used to reduce the amount of energy that we use. With the main fact there is that here in Fairport, we are at a great advantage that we've got Fairport Municipal Commission with Fairport Electric, which is at this point in time very hard to beat in terms of the cost effectiveness and the renewable energy that is created there and that we use in the buildings themselves. Next slide. So again, with improved health and occupancy, all HVAC equipment we have here or that we plan on putting in will be controlled by the building management software. This gives us a greater control of the overall comfort of the users for the spaces. You know, Aaron can, from his phone, if something comes up, check and see if there's a problem anywhere in one of the buildings and address it as needs be. Over the years, a lot of the equipment that are in there where possible, we've instituted MERV 13 filters for greater air filtration and air quality. Another thing that we've got there is where in the high school you can see, for example, that we've been putting in terrazzo flooring, which is very low maintenance, easy to keep clean, great reduction in the use of chemicals on a yearly basis as opposed to, say, the old VCT that you'd have to wax and strip annually. Next slide, please. Another tenant here is as the end users take over the use of the space, it's key that the spaces are used the way that they were designed, the way that we intended them as we designed them. So a large part of that is education of end users moving forward. What we propose to do as a part of the next project is to institute a means of creating displays that could be interactive educational displays for students, especially down in the STEM wing, which would somewhat outline, you know, metrics of, in comparison to other school facilities of this size, how much energy are we actually saving, you know, what's our output in different classes, and just an understanding of what we can do to be better. These are systems that have been used in higher ed facilities, and there have been even competitions between, say, specific departments to see how much energy they could save and beat the other. So it's good, all interactive and educational, and it also ensures that, you know, as people take over use of the spaces, that they are using them the way that they were intended.
Just a quick question. In the new spaces, so in the library, the new classrooms, and in the STEM bump out, will there be air conditioning like the science classrooms?
In the library, there is existing air conditioning.
In the new STEM bump out, will
And
there
the new
also?
STEM bump out, Brett is saying yes, so yes.
Thanks, Ray.
So the important piece to this next part are the fiscals associated with it, and I think Mr. Stevens and I think is it John Baker are going to come forward. Yep, John, just jump. Introduce John.
I'll jump in here first to kind of go over it, and then John can kind of talk about, how we get here in terms of these numbers. Overall project, the pieces that we just saw accounts for about $36.35 million. One of the goals of this portion, in this proposition 1, as we're looking forward, is to try to utilize as much capital reserve that would bring us down to a zero additional local tax impact on this portion. So in order to get there, it's about $18.86 million to bring it down to a zero local share after utilizing reserve. That's derived as our fiscal advisors work through our building aid ratio. So our building aid ratio is 78.9% for 23-24. That is remained fairly stable overall between 78-80%. Wealth is a big piece that goes into that formula at the state level. And then another key piece of any capital project is looking at the bond percentage. So that's the amount of the project that's actually aidable at our aid ratio. What that means is there's allowances that we have to look at, go through. Fiscal advisors looks at our rolling clock of the 5-year fall off of previous projects that frees up aidable dollars. And with this project, between the site work and construction work, it's not all 100% aidable at our aid ratio, which then, again, we utilize that capital reserve money to help offset that portion. So about 72% of the construction itself is aidable work as a whole between the maximum cost allowance dollars. So then we take the $36.35 million less the capital reserve being used, and that brings us to our principal borrowing amount. And then there's interest expense for that. It's borrowed over 15 years. That's the time period in which the state will aid reconstruction projects. We align that during the course of aid received. State building aid, you can see here, estimated to be identical to the debt service itself for that $0 component share after aid. So that's how that ties together. $0 impact on that $200,000 home, 0% on the tax levy overall after utilizing the capital reserve. Let John kind of talk through, cover anything I didn't cover and the assumptions as we look through this process.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. You did a great job covering pretty much everything. Anytime a district asks us to look at the potential impact of a project, there are a few things we want to look at, and Matt touched on a lot of them. First thing we look at is where the district currently is with their capital projects that they've already completed in terms of debt service and aid being received, and see if there are any drop-offs in that local share that we can layer into a project. This last project that the district is currently undertaking kind of captured all of the potential drops in future years for quite a while. So in this scenario, we didn't want to include any of that. We wanted to look at this project on its own. The second thing we look at is the maximum cost allowances available at each of the district's buildings. Maximum cost allowances are the maximum amount of aid the state is willing to pay at any particular school building. It's broken up into construction and incidental cost allowances. Construction being any work taking place within the footprint of the building, your incidental maximum cost allowances being any site work and any professional fees associated with the project. After we have those things, we look at the scope of the project, determine the aidability of the project, and when compared to those maximum cost allowances, and use that to develop a potential building aid schedule in which the state will reimburse the district at its building aid ratio of 78.9%. So doing all of that, we determined that 71.8% of this project would be eligible for aid at the district's building aid ratio payable over 15 years. And in order to to have the debt service match the building aid ratio to achieve the required zero tax impact that is most advisable or most agreeable is the district would need to utilize $18.86 million of its existing capital reserve to lower the borrowing amount. So the debt service equals the building aid being paid every year. And we did make a few assumptions in terms of how this project would be aided. We assumed about 50% of the building aid units, which are used to calculate the maximum cost allowances from Minerva to land, would be carried over to the high school, and the addition, or the STEM tech addition portion, would receive another 115 building aid units. We have since received word from the state that those are accurate numbers, so we're safe to assume that the aid we had estimated for this project is fairly accurate as much as it can be to this point. Again, like I said, the project will be paid for and aided over a 15-year period, resulting in a no tax impact project for this proposition.
Can you remind us, or some, Matt, either of you, how long a building aid unit cycles through?
It's every 5 years. So when you submit a project to SED, when the fiscal associate at SED picks up that project and decides to do the maximum cost allowance calculation for that project to determine what will be eligible for aid, they'll look back 5 years from that date and look for any projects that had received SED approval within those 5 years. And then those projects are then deducted from what is available.
So the STEM bump out, for example, using the 115, is it from the date that it's completed and handed over to us for use? At 2026 would be 115 units, then 5 years later they would come back to us.
Well, additions are a little bit different. They are given their own maximum cost allowance. So just the addition portion of this project will be aided at the maximum cost allowances that 115 building aid units would generate. For any future projects, those 115 building aid units are then added to the renovation building aid units. So it's considered part of the existing footprint already.
I'll just reword the question then. So renovation building aid units, from the time it's completed, so all the science classrooms, for example, just in this building, those units become unavailable starting at the date that they're usable, or is it from the beginning of the project when they start construction? Because it takes a year to construct them, for example. Is that a year of part of the 5-year cycle, or?
So the 5-year cycle is based on the commissioner's approval date, so the date you receive SED approval, not the date that it's completed. Or
so that's before construction begins, then?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So
So it would be sooner than
yeah, at least from a use standpoint. Great.
Any other questions? Okay, all right. This is just a quick visualization of the funding sources for this project. As we stated, there is no new tax levy associated with this proposition. 57% of the project costs would be funded through state building aid, and the capital reserve making up the other 43%. So again, no new tax impact because of this.
And the capital reserve that's being used, that's money that is already in a capital reserve, and a capital reserve has to be used for, it's specifically can't be moved around. It's for a capital project, right?
Correct. So capital building reserves are established by voter approval, and then can be funded by board resolution at the end of each fiscal year. And they may only be used with voter approval, so it would have to be embedded into a proposition that indicates that we will be utilizing X number of dollars from however many reserves that we have, and that dollar amount coming out of each one of those capital building reserves. It may only be used for that purpose. So it's funded and meant for capital building projects only.
Yeah. No, I guess because with this 18 million and that I believe was it 15 million that we had originally approved to fund when we funded it last year with the or what's that?
From the 2022 vote?
Yes.
I think it was 19.2.
Okay.
Cool. That's what we had said back with that.
Okay.
project.
Okay.
Yep. So the reduction, again, there's a reduction in scope overall, which dropped the dollar amount that was needed to get us to the $0 additional tax impact.
Because it's a smaller scope. Yeah, that was some yeah, because a lot of community members asked, why is it less? But I keep pointing out that the scope is much smaller, so that is exactly why.
Well, not just, and reduction in scope and removal of non-aided portions of that previous scope as well. So those were two big pieces that.
Well, the reduction of scope is what's driving part of this meeting tonight, because we will see the cost of why it can be done without a tax impact, this first one, when we get to the next one.
Correct.
Just don't want to lose the essence of that question. Reserves are assigned, right? And I think it's very thoughtful in how the board each year, it's part of, I think, each one of our goals each year when it comes to budgeting and fiscal responsibility is making sure that our reserves are allocated accordingly. And we're using the capital reserve to offset the cost of a capital project. We use the tech reserve to offset the cost of technology. So thank you for asking that question.
Just really quick, one thing I've learned from Matt being on audit and finance these past 2 years I've been on the board is that how important it is for fiscal responsibility to use those reserves for the purposes that they're there for, in a way to something like this, have zero tax levy or minimize the tax impact. And you don't want the money just sitting there. You want to be able to use it on where it's needed. So
give it back. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thanks, John.
So this,
You'll be back.
the next piece, talk about the next steps related to the aforementioned scope of work that we talked about. Again, the community engagement piece, ongoing through the voter resolution date, the vote date. The next piece is the initial seeker resolution. Seeker stands for State Environmental Quality Review. That is a requirement of any capital project that we pursue. And the initial resolution is really the resolution that establishes, it's the first part of the environmental assessment that takes place by our architectural firm. And this establishes the lead agency. So in a project with as much site work and scope and internal building work taking place here, it's anticipated that this would be a type 1 determination, which would require a coordinated review. So similar to when we had the December vote, the process would involve the designation of a lead agency, so the district would be interested in that process. And then we would send information out to involved agencies such as New York State Education Department, Department of Environmental Conservation, those different areas that would be involved state agencies through that process, just to inform them of the lead agency process. So that has to be done no less than 30 days prior to actually determining the action of the seeker process. That would take place in August, coupled with the proposition resolution, which then establishes that vote date, identifies the proposition to be placed on the ballot. Those are the pieces that take place in August. That has to take place at least 45 days prior to the vote date. So it's gives a little bit more time. We have to have the publication time, working with the newspapers and those pieces to be sure we can have everything published at least 45 days prior to October 12th of 23, and then the capital improvement proposition vote date of October 12th of 23. So those are the pieces, those 3 bullets there are really the legal pieces that we have to follow as a school district as we move through a process of any capital improvement project.
Before we go on to the next proposition, does anyone have any questions on Proposition 1, which of course you'll be going back later and asking more questions, but before we head out, I just want to make sure that we feel comfortable moving forward. Thumbs up. Thanks. Proposition 2, track and field facility. The one thing, again, I really appreciate about this Fairport Board of Education is they care about the community. They have a firm belief in people's voices and hearing people's voices, and I think that's one of the main features of this proposition is try to meet the needs of the school community, increase student and community use of the track and field facility, making sure that our facilities are equitable, accessible, safe, and modern. We've heard from many families and student athletes, contrary to that. And we're all very focused on fiscal responsibility so we can sustain our amazing programming and continue to put forth the quality programming that everyone comes to expect. So those were the goals in mind as we developed this next proposition. I'm going to ask Athletic Director Fritz Killian, and I'm going to ask, again, Mr. Clark and our friends from Labella to come forward to talk about the track and field facility.
Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate everybody that has spoken on behalf of the track at either at this meeting or previous meetings, and I really appreciate the board support and Superintendent Provenzano's support in terms of all the facility improvements that we've done in my time at Fairport. Like Mr. Clark, I'm also a track dad. One of my children did participate in track. She's graduated now, but all four of my children have been heavily involved in school activities, 2 non-athletes, the other 2 athletes. And there's nothing like being involved in extracurricular activities associated with your school. That's why our kids want to do robotics, because they want to have that Fairport jersey on that says the robotics team. That's why our students want to try out for the musical, because they want to be in that auditorium. And that's why our students want to try out for our athletic teams. And I've certainly understand the comments in terms of where youth sports are and where we get into situations where certain student athletes don't make certain teams. Not every sport is able to take on a large number of student athletes. Track and field is one of them. We will have at least 140 on our high school track team. Between our 2 middle schools, we have at least 120 to 130. And those are student athletes that don't necessarily have to have had exposure to that sport K through 6. That's a sport where they can try that right off the bat and modified and be successful. There's also been countless names that I'm certainly not going to mention here in Fairport and also my previous district where we had student athletes that were not able to make a certain sports team. They would come to my office, we would talk, they would go to track and field, and they were extremely successful. And there's probably at least 3 or 4 of them that have gone on and were able to receive some college assistance in terms of an athletic scholarship because of track and field. It's probably one of the best school dropout prevention programs that I'm aware of, that I know of, and that I've dealt with. In terms of the slide that you see up here, and I'm certainly not going to repeat what we heard in terms of what's wrong with our current track. I think that's been said time and time again. But in terms of what this proposition is going to provide us with an 8-lane track, and in terms of the number of student athletes that we can have on our team, it's going to provide efficiency. It's going to maximize opportunity. And when I was first notified of an 8-lane track facility, immediately I thought of invitationals. And when I came to Fairport 7 years ago, I came here because this is the Green Bay Packers and the New York Yankees of Section 5. You talk with any athletic director, that's what Fairport is about, and that's what interscholastic athletics is about. We have improved our facilities in terms of the gym, the scoreboard, our locker rooms, and our turf stadium and the multi-purpose turf field. Now there's an opportunity for this track to be right along with it, because there certainly is a standard within Monroe County in Section 5. Right now we're not meeting that standard. In terms of having invitationals and hosting sectional championships, that's something that our community is very in favorable of. That's something that our student athletes would certainly benefit from. And as someone that has hosted Section 5 football playoff games, boys lacrosse games, wrestling championships, and basketball games, it brings pride to the community. And I know our community expects it. I also know they love it, and that's based on the feedback that I get, and also based on the feedback I get from Section 5 and other colleagues I have throughout New York State. In terms of a grandstand, that is going to allow our fans to be able to watch a track meet above ground level. It's also going to allow us to run a track meet above ground level. You're able to see when you're elevated as the announcer or as the meet manager. You can see what's happening, and you can be aware of any potential safety protocols that need to be addressed when you're elevated, and that's really, really important in terms of running a track meet. The scoreboard with a PA system, that's going to give our student athletes immediate feedback. Athletics is no different than academics. We learn from assessment. And when you're running a race and you're not able to see your time, you might hear it as you're running past, or you may see it on a carbon copy piece of paper. If you're able to see it on a scoreboard, your time with your team score, that's instant assessment, and that just improves your overall strategy of the meet. In terms of high jump, a new high jump facility area, that is going to provide us with enough space for a proper approach to that event. Right now, our current track, we don't have the proper space. Athletes have changed, the events have changed, and our student athletes are bigger, they're faster, and they're stronger. In terms of a steeplechase, that's an event that our athletes don't have the opportunity to practice or train for at Fairport. And we have had athletes that have been very, very successful in steeplechase in spite of not having that. It would be wonderful to have a facility to complement them and allow them to shine. In terms of pole vaulting and having 2 pole vault areas and 2 long jump, triple jump areas, as well as our throwing areas, you're allowing for optimal efficiency in terms of a practice and how time is run during a practice and a meet. Today is much, much different. Our students are busier, our families are busier, and there's just more to do. And in terms of the other sports and what we're able to accomplish, it really is going to be a benefit to our track and field community with this diagram and the bullet points. I'm also going to add 2 other things that have been recently brought to my attention and something I'm dealing with this week. We all know that we have a shortage of officials, track and field officials, just like any other sport. We also have a shortage of bus drivers. And it has become so apparent that right now, and it's not going to happen this spring, but I know it's coming, our track meets are going to look differently. Right now we have dual track meets. So for example, we had one of our coaches mentioned a dual meet that we had within our league. We're going to be getting to a place really, really soon where that may not be happening. We may be having league meets, but it might be 3 or 4 teams. If that happens, we will not be able to host a meet. That's not going to be able to happen. And it's going to get to the point where I'm going to be in the minority in terms of a vote, and we won't be able to host meets because we don't meet that standard. In terms of physical education classes, this facility, it's going to provide easier access to our phys ed students. We only have a certain limited time to get to phys ed and then back into the building to change and go on to the next class. And again, track and field is for everybody. It's walking, it's running, it's jumping, and it's a great lifetime sport. In terms of other students, probably one of the biggest events, and we've had a lot of celebrations with this past week with our girls track and field team winning a Section 5 title, girls lacrosse team winning a Section 5 title, and baseball winning a Section 5 title. But I'm also equally as proud, if not more, as our unified sport, our student athletes. Those are our students that have intellectual disabilities. That is a New York State Public Athletic Association sanctioned sport. We have unified basketball, we have unified bowling, and although there's not unified track yet, I'm sure it's going to be coming. But we are taking kids, when I say we, our wonderful phys ed teachers, myself, and some other classroom teachers and administrators, we're taking what I would say the equivalent right now of elementary unified track athletes to a track meet at Rush Henrietta this Friday. Before the pandemic, we would have a Special Olympic track meet. Those days are probably not going to come back because of how different things are run, but we're taking them to Rush Henrietta. It would be great if we could highlight our unified athletes to host a track meet, a unified track meet. We can't do that within this current facility. It's a challenge, and it's just a real challenge to get fans back there, to provide assistance for fans and officials to get back to the current location. This proposed new facility would really provide easier access. Again, want to thank Superintendent Provenzano and the board for letting me talk, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Clark or Mr. Williams if they have anything to add, and if not, I can answer some questions later.
No, I think you covered most of it. The only thing I would add is just talking about the storage piece of things that was on there. It was a conversation that we had in our most recent meeting, just to make sure that, you know, just like our science classrooms, we didn't put old 50-year-old science furniture back in there. Some of the things that our student athletes and coaches have talked about is the mats and the gates, et cetera, and they need to be stored properly to protect our investments, and that's a part of this as well. So I think that would be it.
So the features would be, again, to host multi-team invitationals, grandstands and press boxes, increased track area, storage, and increased community access to the track. Are just some of the highlights, and probably much more that we were planning on.
Correct.
Troy, do you want to come and talk about sustainability?
So much like inside the building, for any site project that we do, we've got to manage our stormwater on site. Any runoff has to be treated here before it's filtered out. For the track system itself, the coating, the painting, the striping, everything be based on low VOC, which are low emitting coatings. The track surface itself will have a high use of recycled materials. We will be conducting a feasibility study on adding EV charging stations to the site. And as part of the track, the levels that Fritz was alluding to, we will be managing soil disposal by using the soil that we would be cutting out from the stem addition and using that to fill portions of the track side to get everything balanced out there.
Thank you for sharing.
Sorry, can I just jump on number 5 there?
Yeah.
Our suitable soil situation, are we just assuming we're gonna have unsuitable soil for this part?
I mean, but you can't predict it. So as much as you don't,
All of our other projects keep happening.
unless we want to spend, it's just part of the scope of the work. You have to plan for it because sometimes, most of the times, the soil is underneath area that is currently in use, and to totally disrupt that and get the sampling, that could be inefficient, and not a good use of dollars too. So.
But there is some assumption that there's some degree.
Well, we typically, for every project like this, we will be doing geotechnical studies, so hopefully that takes a lot of the assumptions out of it.
Is that more extensive than what we did for the other fields? So we would have a better planning? Because I mean, it did cost over $100,000 to address it for the last one.
So, yeah, you can do preemptive borings. You could do them during the project. You can also miss something that's 1 foot over. Okay. So unfortunately, you can't find everything. If there's an inherent understanding that there's a bad area and we start hitting a few bad spots, we can go in between them with additional borings. You will not be 100% secure that you will not find anything, unfortunately.
And I would add, that's why we have a contingency budget built within a project cost estimate. When campus works through those pieces, those are some of the things that have to be built into any project. When you have a lot of site work taking place, that would be a big area of potential use of the contingency budget portion of the capital project.
As we've seen at times, unfortunately. Our friends from campus.
Welcome back. So in this version, everything stays the same, but we do add the track and field. It's notable that we need 2 years in order to construct that track surface. So it would start as soon as track was done in 2025, and it would continue into the fall of 26. So we would lose a track season in 26, or have all away meets at that point.
Some might argue we're already losing them.
That's true.
What? Can you just give kind of a summary? Why would this project take that long?
Yeah, so you have to do a lot of under drain, and when you spray the surface, it's very temperamental. You can't spray below 50 degrees, it can't rain, there's wind requirements, and they won't guarantee it. So to crunch it into the fall of 25 or even attempt to promise the season, we've been unsuccessful before. So to do it right, we need the full two years.
Does it ever work out that maybe?
No.
No, never,
It's-
never, okay.
And all of a sudden, if you got everything done and you're going to spray the surface and it's September, October, the installer's already saying, well, we can't guarantee anything, and they'll actually shy away from it.
Okay, this is a dumb question, but it's been bugging me. The little like light green square in between the football field and the track by the parking lot, what's that gonna be?
That's stormwater management.
Cool.
That was on my question list too.
Mr. Stevens. And John. Dick.
Okay, so this next piece, we saw Proposition 1 and the costs, and capital reserve needed to reduce that down to 0. Due to the timing and usage of all the maximum cost dollars, this would generate no aid as a project for the track proposition if taking place at the same time period. So you see $9.47 million in the referendum. Again, building aid ratio 78.9%, a 0% bond percentage, though, indicating that no portion of this project is aidable. You see interest, total debt of $13.37 million, and the component share after aid of $13.37 million, again, with no state building aid. This averages out to $836,000 a year, which is ultimately an impact of about $48 per year on a $200,000 home, or about 1% increase on our tax levy. It doesn't take place until we get to the point of approval of a project and borrowing, et cetera, that actually would be an impact on the tax levy itself overall. So that's a basic summary on that. I think that's, speaks for itself in terms of the impact. I don't know if John, there's anything to add to that, really?
No, Matt pretty much covered it. This is a pretty simple portion of the project in terms of projecting. We know that because of the high school project is over incidental maximum cost allowances, any additional site work taking place will not be aided. So essentially the district is paying for the track dollar for dollar.
What so we have the 5 years. When was the last approval? So what is our deadline until we could get?
So in order for the track to receive aid, you would have to delay submission to SED until February of 2026. So that pushes the whole timeline out another 2 years.
And completion of construction out another 2 years. You're not looking until 2028. Also, long-term thinking on that is it also will impact any future projects at the high school and will take away from the incidental cost allowance and aidability of any future high school projects.
Yeah, and I think we've talked a little bit about how that would impact the pool, which I know a lot of our community members also feel strongly about. So if we push this, we push that.
And sorry, Mr. Stevens, can you talk me through, so the 1% on the tax levy, that would be kind of what happened this year, right? So this year with our budget vote, about 1-ish% was the 2019 debt coming due. So this would be, what year would we look at that?
This would be out, gosh, I'm trying to think here with
25, 26.
Around 25, 26, 26, 27, one of those 2 fiscal years. We'd have a short-term borrowing take place probably in 25, 26. We try to delay it as best as possible to a July borrowing. So then that buys us an extra fiscal year for when that first short-term borrowing comes due. And then when we get to the end and completion of the work is when we go to final long-term debt as a whole, when we'd see that really come on. But you're probably looking at 25, 26 as an estimated year.
Yeah, and we do have the option to kind of step that up over 2 years. So it'd be like 0.6% the first year, and then 0.4% additional the second year to get to that 1%, and then it's just the standard 1%.
I think that's an important point we do need to talk about tonight, because our budget vote this May only was approved 60% to 40%. And looking back historically, we haven't been that low of an approval rating on our budget since 2011, and then before that it was 1994. So that not a great. I worry about our budget and then having this occur again in 2026, having to add on that 1% and then still ask for our instructional budget.
It's definitely a conversation that the board needs to have.
So this would mean we are not billing, for lack of a better word, until the 2025-2026 school year, correct?
Yeah, approximately. Yeah, because it
approximately.
has to go through, so really, right, assuming once a project gets approved,
Have other tracks been funded through private donations? It's a scary question, I know, and you never want to count on money that's not there.
yeah, I mean, it certainly varies probably by school district and community if there have been donations. Not familiar with any recently. However, you would need to know that prior to the process, you know, moving forward.
Yeah, okay.
Prior to the vote. Yeah,
Really
essentially.
If it's going to be included in the proposition as part of the funding source for the project, then yes.
Okay. I know that's been a rumbling of some parents saying, you know, a large sizable donation.
I've brought it up many times, and I've looked into things. I don't see anyone stepping up to assist us here. Maybe if I start, I don't know what the word would be, if I start trying for donations for a pool, by the time that happens, maybe. But I know this is something I've brought up a number of times as well, and have sent things and looked at things, and it does not appear that we have some large donors, unfortunately. That's okay.
All right, but I think it's just good for people to realize that that was something that we at least would have thought of if that was an option. Oh, it is. Oh, maybe I was probably, I just said, I think it's something good for the public to realize that. Thank you.
But if anyone listening would like to, you know, cut us a check. No.
No, yes.
But again, I think the longer we wait, the larger the increase in the cost will be. We've already seen that in moving it up from the original estimate, that building materials increase, just like everything else in
Costs don't go down.
No.
Did you have, is there more to the presentation before we start discussing it?
Well, I think having the conversation about what you just heard in some of these things, I think it's a natural flow of that before we get into what it could look like. Because I know that's part of your thinking too, because I know there's some questions.
Oh, sorry, just a question for our Labella friends. On the track, what's going to be the work that's done kind of alongside the yards of the houses? I think it's on Matthews. You know, can you just kind of describe for the people who live there? I know it's a small population, but like, what can they expect to have happening if this starts happening, and what kind of work cooperation do you do with them? That kind of thing.
The walkway they come down?
No, that lane of the track. Can you bring the track back up, right?
I don't know if it's as close as some of our other fields,
so
but
like
yeah.
The bottom lanes there. Sorry, I should be in the mic. So like the bottom lanes there, right next to where it says no track in the 2026 season. There's
The
that
houses that back up to it.
Yeah.
How close is that?
So how close is that to the houses?
Are we going into any of their property? Are we taking away any?
Not going into their property for
well,
sure.
No, I mean, no,
So-
but
so-
the trees or landscaping, are we infringing upon any of that?
There'll be no effect on their property, and
Okay.
that's the goal of any work we do.
So just like we
Can't
do
work
currently,
off-site.
just like we do currently, you know, you look at Aaron Smith, who does a great job interacting with neighbors. And I know that we had
That's why I
Sam.
asked.
We've had Sam Farina also interact with neighbors. We're very interested in being good neighbors. So that will be part of our process, is reaching out and letting them know the timeline and the scope and our intentions, just like we've done at all the other buildings. For example, Jefferson Avenue, I recalled that we had some great conversations there with neighbors. It's gone positively as far as I have not heard, and I'm usually one to hear. as we move through these processes. So
And we've been a part of that, and if you want us to be there again, we'll do it.
Yeah. So no shot put like
No, we shot
into
putting
Matthew
into-
Drive.
That's fair. That's
You
a
can
fair
see
question.
the
No
shot
poll
put.
voting, no poll vote.
That's a fair question.
Yeah, so some of those events are pulled away from those homes. You can see on the site plan. So shot put and discus are running away, and then the jumps are either inside the D zones or just outside. Olympics, yes.
Are there other questions, yeah, that anyone else on the board has?
Are we just open?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because I know we're going to move on to talk about the different propositions, which is a whole nother conversation, and trying to explain.
So I guess first of all, kind of big picture, the naming is confusing. So we kind of came out with the 20, well, you guys did, I wasn't on the board yet, with the 29 project, 2019 was going to be phase 1. And then the 2022 vote was going to be phase 2. But now we're calling the 2023 vote phase 1, Fairport for the forward, Fairport for the future, forward? Fairport for the future.
Yep.
I feel like we need to take a step back and remind the community that we're looking at 3 big phases, 2023 being the second one, and then hopefully 2025, and then moving to much more of a maintenance cycle kind of approach. I worry that if we're calling this one phase 1, it's going to start getting into that murky confusion. What are we asking for? So I think that's an important point for us to look at as we're marketing this, that this is hunk 2. We're going to come out and ask for hunk 3, and then we want to move to a much more maintenance-based cycle to get our facilities where they are. I struggle with the track. I know we need it. So I have to preface it that way. It's not good enough for our students. It's not good enough for our community. It's not safe, and it does have to be done. I worry about the recent budget passing rate at 60-40, and then coming out and asking for a tax increase and the potential impact that would have on the first portion that we talked about, on making sure that our academic spaces are ready. So can we talk through what happens if we do this as 2 propositions? Proposition 1 being the no tax increase, all the academic buildings. Proposition 2 being the track. Talk through with me what happens if it goes down. What does it look like going forward?
Yep, and
what
that's-
happens to our academic space?
And that is part of what I think we're going to talk about after that. People will not be able to vote yes for the track and no. But before we move there, I did want to just see, in terms of like structurally, questions for the folks that are here, because I know that conversation is coming up pretty much next. Also, just want to say that I think, from my perspective, it's a choice, right? And I know we'll talk about this. So people will have a choice to vote yes or no. We're putting it out there. We're not saying you have to vote yes or no as an additional proposition. And I know we're going to talk about it. I also feel like having something to channel energy around and people, getting more people out to vote. I feel like a lot of folks in our community assume our budgets are going to pass and just think because in years past they have, that they don't necessarily have to get out and vote. So it is possible that if folks in our community would like the track, again, hoping that it can be accessible to community members as well, that it might actually bring more people who would assume the original one would pass. But I know we're going to talk about the propositions after.
But on that note, and I would hope, we've seen just amazing turnout from the track community. Like the emails have been so wonderful, and I really appreciate everyone sharing their stories. But we had a really good turnout for our budget vote this year and still did not have great, it passed, it was 60%, but it wasn't our normal 70%. So I think keeping that in mind, we did have good turnout.
And 60% is still good. Sorry, you keep using negative terms. 60% in elections is considered wonderful, right? We've had incredible beyond that, but I don't think we should lose track that 60% is dismal.
But setting it historically in the Fairport.
Absolutely, but I'm just talking about elections generally. Sorry, I just don't agree with the terms you're using to make it sound like it was a miserable. It was our highest turnout. Yes, no came out. We've never seen. I brought this up when I had a BOCES in Albany area. You know, for the first time in my years that we had no signs out, and most people were very surprised. You just don't get that very often in school budgets. So there was a concerted effort. I can make comments about it. I can appreciate people coming around together. My opinion, it was short-sighted, right? It's short-sighted because some of them are now making comments, oh yeah, I will vote yes for the track. Well, your vote yes for the track happened back in December when you didn't vote yes, right? When you voted no then because you said vote no then. But that, as we look at it even tonight, $48, we were proposing what, 56 back in December? Most of it was track related, right? And we're still putting it back out there. It was short-sighted. We've got to communicate better about what we've done, but I think 60% voter approval was very solid. It's solid when it comes to elections. We just have to have that kind of turnout. The community has to speak up. It cannot be done by assumption. And that's our communication.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the other districts across the state, we were not different than others. Like you said, Peter. But Mary Caitlin, just to go back on what you said about the communication, I think when I joined the board, I agree that we need to be very clear. I think we're trying to be as clear with everything we've been putting forth recently. I know Brian and I were in a meeting, and the assumption was that the pool rendition that had been provided, I don't know, brought back in 19 was still what was going to be done. So I think after hearing that and realizing that updates weren't going out to the community, that there was confusion, Mary Caitlin. So I agree. I feel like we are trying to get the information out more so than maybe before in different ways. Not everybody reads the newspapers. Not everybody reads the commentator. We need to have a variety. So I do agree that we need to be very clear in terms of this is a big project. Yes, there's going to be another big project, but the goal in the end here across the board is that we're going to do smaller projects for maintenance. That didn't happen for years, and that is why we're here. We can't keep pushing it off. We need to do this, do the next one, and then, yes, the rolling, where it's not going to be a huge impact. But I'll stop talking now.
I can't envision a way where we're going to successfully communicate some of the details that we've even talked here tonight, building aid units. I'm going back in history. Out of curiosity, I'm not asking this, please spend no time on it, but I've wondered how much building aid units we've left on the table at the time when we were well, what's the phrase? The year I was elected, but while I was being elected, that Fairport wants Cadillac services and facilities on a Chevy budget. You can't have those. Over time, you end up paying more, and that's what we're trying to do with our 3 large projects, right, is to catch us up to where we get into a true maintenance mode, keep the facilities up to date. And we'll have to do that. Science rooms will get old again. We don't want them to get 50 years old again. Right? We don't want to do that. We don't want to have to do such major construction. We want to do things in smaller increments where we can absorb it into our regular budget process and setting aside reserves. But I don't know how we'll ever be successful to understand that we shouldn't be leaving building aid units on the table like for 10 years where we just didn't use them. Right? We left 75 cents or 78, 79 cents for every dollar at the state because we chose not to use them. We didn't want to go there and do these major or even maintenance. Those are decisions of history that we're paying for now. We can pay for them again in the future. We can even delay this one. We can do that. But this track is not going to get better, right? And it's going to become useless to us. And that, to me, is, again, short-sighted. I think we would be foolish not to put it back out there to the community, but then we have to put it on the shoulders of the community with communication to say, show up. You cannot assume that this will pass.
So, MC, I agree with your working on the nomenclature of phase 2, and I know that's not necessarily something we're deciding tonight, but I agree that if this is, we're still, that's still part of that clear communication, and this is part of it. You did raise a question, and maybe Mr. Clark, you can speak to this, or Brett, or whomever. We're talking a lot about the track with good reason, thanks to our awesome community partners. But that first part about this work at the schools and our academic spaces, You know, that is framed around a lot, not just as you said, Mr. Clark, we need to update these spaces because they're old and need to be updated, but we're merging schools. We're bringing the ninth graders over here in 2026. I'm right on that one, right? Whew. 2026. And they're coming in 2026. So to MC's point, I think, I hate to bring up the doomsday scenario, but if that first proposition doesn't pass, what does high school look like here with ninth graders coming over anyway?
So we're heading back into workshop territory.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the short answer is it works. We will be able to get students into spaces. There will have to be some minor reconstruction for some administrative offices, but we went through that very clearly in January. There'll be limited space. There'll be limited access to know that, Mr. Malber, he's in his room every third period, or Mr. Moretter, he's having lunch with students, doing study sessions. The predictability of that totally becomes, pretty congested and unpredictable.
I mean, all of this, I guess, for me, when Brett and I have these theoretical conversations, comes down to value judgments. And, taking that feedback from our students and staff and understanding like what they're looking for, is where we work ourselves out of that decision analysis of like, we can just make it happen. And so, that's a sort of a pandemic mentality. If you tell me it has to happen tomorrow, like I'm going to go into problem solving mode and we'll figure it out and I'll do it with the least amount of resources possible. What we proposed is getting back to that paradox of like, how do we modernize all of our spaces and become fiscally sustainable over time and benefit our students at the same time. Like we're really trying to kill a lot of things all at once and be smart about it. And again, that work from the DAC and the Building Condition Survey represented over $200 million worth of work, which was never going to pass in any universe. And so chunking it out as we are and doing it in the way that we did, we started with a roof because it was leaking. That's where we started our projects, if you think back.
So, but was even deeper than that. It's the mindset of our community wanted equitable, accessible, safe, and modern facilities. We spent a lot of time, a lot of resources. Early on, when I was superintendent, we had thousands of pieces of data that spoke to our community's expectations. And this is just building upon that. You're right. The pandemic mentality, we're moving away from that. We heard from our staff, from our community in January when the board workshop was occurring.
It comes at a cost. Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to. It just comes at a cost.
Right. And thank you both for that. And I think, to your point, Brett, you say it would work. We don't want it to work.
Right.
All right. It's the same way for athletics. We don't want just a track. We want something that represents Fairport in the way we want to represent Fairport. And that's, I think, even more so for the academic spaces because that's what we do. So I guess I just kind of stressing the importance of that first part of this proposition. And, not just because there's no tax impact or, whatever. I think it's so important that we stress how important this is for our ninth graders, for our staff, for our school community, that work matters.
And that's the reason why that you will not, if we put a second proposition on, you can't vote yes for that if you haven't voted yes for the first one. Without the first one, there's no track. And you can't vote to say, I don't want that stuff in the buildings, I'm here for a track. That can't happen because obviously what's most important here are the academics of the buildings, or our upkeep, the STEM, all of that. So the second is, well, if you want this too, you'll have to vote separately and it will cost us some money, where the first one is not going to raise our taxes in any way. And so I think it's a fair way to do it. I think the first one to bring it up. It wasn't accepted very well my first day, but I'm still at it until the day I leave. I think it's the way to do it because the community, we're not deciding we're going to do the track. Yeah. We're just saying the community has the chance to add the track to the first proposition. They may or may not want it. I don't know, but I think it should be there for that option.
I think we might do ourselves a little bit disfavor. You've said it several times, Bob. I don't know that we're emphasizing enough. Put the merger aside. Facilities need updated. Period. period. That is the point, right? Our facilities need updated.
And we'd
Yes,
love to renovate our homes all at once, but that's not possible either. I don't know about your budgets, but
I have a few ideas, but you're like,
yeah, right.
Computer's been doing
We
its testing
try.
for how long?
But
I
it's, we
think
can do that
that's-
pragmatically.
Sorry, Bob.
That's
I think that's a key when you brought it up earlier is in terms of our homes. You know, people worry about the demographic of, say, my age and the voting and thinking that they won't want it. Most of us built our first homes in Fairport, 40 years ago? And certainly in the time, well, hopefully, we've replaced roofs and driveways and siding and all that kind of thing. That did not happen in the Fairport schools, and I'm right with you. You know, having been an employee here, we were placing buckets in classrooms to catch rainwater, right? That's improved over time, step by step, but this is an important step as well. And I think that's a big selling point, at least to my demographic, where people have worried that we would say we don't have kids in school. I have grandkids in school. Many of the people do. When we did the information meetings for the last vote, we had plenty of senior citizens in the audience, all of whom ended up being very agreeable by the end of Brett's presentation. So I'm not sure that is the troublesome demographic, but if it is, I think that long-term maintenance is important, is critical in terms of the argument. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, I think the challenge, just to my friends in the track community. Again, I'm a track dad for the first time, but is being patient in that line of like all the things that needed to be addressed, and it had to start in the classroom. And the science classrooms were the most important part of this. They were 60-year-old rooms too. We couldn't have safe labs, and so we were still having wonderfully successful STEM students. They were going off to med school and doing all sorts of things. Same analogy to our track athletes. And now, finally, after 6 years of planning and 3 years of construction, we have new science classrooms. And so, I ask for your patience, because I understand, again, as a parent, what it's like to be on the other side of it and why you had to wait. But we're trying as best we can to balance all of the needs and get it all done at once. Just wasn't feasible.
In knowing that there's another phase, I think that Dr. Wright was speaking to, and I know that there are groups out there who are passionate about another phase. Because of phasing, we can't get to certain things that need to happen inside the building too, that are just as important to what occurs with our track and field teams. And I know you understand that.
So I think Brett is showing options for.
This is just a sample,
Yeah,
because I know the
samples.
board has talked about
Yep.
this, and this is by no means like the deal. This is just an idea of what it could look like, and Mr. Stevens is going to walk through that.
So just to jump here, this is the technical legal language required for a proposition itself. So this is developed by our bond counsel, and we go through that process. It identifies where work is anticipated to take place. A lot of that's based on seeker process and all those different aspects that flow through this. So this is the legal language for a proposition resolution. Obviously, you see blanks there. Those are dollar amounts that just would need to be filled in through the process of, when we have the total proposition, how much capital reserves used, and so on. So again, this is just to show the sample legal language required in the proposition resolution. This is
Emphasizes the scope of what we were referring to. Correct?
Yeah, this in essence is what ends up on a ballot. So when you see those proposition resolutions that get approved, so this would be the August resolution that would identify what proposition would be going on the ballot. This is that language here. Talks about how it talks about how the project is funded. Talks about the state aid you can see in here. It talks about allowing the tax levy for debt and so on, and how that works through the capital project process. This is related strictly if there were one proposition on the ballot. And the next slide, if you jump.
You jumped too far.
Uh-oh. So I know it's small. You can try to put it all on one slide so you could see it. This is if the district were to look at two propositions, and you notice basically proposition one is similar to what it would be for one proposition. Proposition two, that first sentence, if you see those first pieces of language, say if proposition one is approved. So that's that language identifying if we're to do two propositions with one contingent upon the other, that's the language that would be required in that proposition resolution. So that just shows and identifies that. And then again, you see here, it identifies where the work's taking place, the high school campus, and has to identify all the different pieces that could be embedded into the work itself.
Sorry, so can you talk me through what's the difference between the one proposition and the two propositions? Does the one proposition still have the track in it?
No.
No.
No, Proposition
So the last
1.
slide
Proposition
is just
1
the
is
work.
only that Fairport High School and Martha Brown work that we reviewed at the beginning of the presentation.
Okay.
Yes. That was just to show it as a standalone, if it were by itself. This slide here with 2 proposition is that Fairport High School, Martha Brown work in Proposition 1, and then Proposition 2 is the track work.
Good question. Point of clarification. And again, speaking about messaging, we would have to be very clear, and I know that we've talked about some possibilities if the board chooses to go that route of how we can be clear and do our best to get them. That's right. We got flyers for you to pass out.
So, can you talk me through, so we do both propositions, Proposition 1 passes and Proposition 2 doesn't. What does that look like then? How do we need to do the track, right? Well, I can't say we're all in agreement, but it's gonna have to happen. It's not in the best condition. So what does that look like moving forward?
So how do we support the track, or how do we, I mean, because if it gets voted down, we won't be able to do that extensive invitational track. We would have to go back to the, I think, one of our, Mr. Rudnicki said, what's our plan B, right? I
Yeah,
think that's our question. If the board chooses to do Proposition 1 and Proposition 2, Proposition 2 does not pass because voters say it, we go to Plan B.
Which basically would be taking a look at what are our options and desires as a district. So are we going to develop another capital project? Is it going to involve simply a resurface? There's multiple things you look at. No different than when any capital project fails. It's taking a look at the scope. Are we scaling it back for a future project vote? Is it just going to be repairs and maintenance through the general fund? Those are the different pieces we'd have to look at as a district. So, yep, those are options in any time any capital project fails.
Can you guys walk me through, sorry, MC, I like that nomenclature, I'm gonna steal it. The idea on the ballot, basically you have to vote yes on 1 to vote on 2? Or you have to vote yes on 1 to be able to vote yes on, I'm a little confused on that language, like if
We
you.
need to find out about the software for the machines,
Okay.
which Pam was gonna look into, so that either it'll kick the ballot if there's a no and then a yes.
I think Matt
But
has an
others-
answer.
Others, do you have?
Oh,
the
I can jump in.
information?
Basically,
Okay, 'cause others
basically
have done
both
it,
propositions
so-
would be on the ballot, and then you'd look at the results. So the results basically would say if Proposition 1 passes and Proposition 2 passes, both pass. If Proposition 1 fails, Proposition 2 passes. The language right here in the proposition indicates that it's not going to move forward. So it's not that
yes
they.
vote would be tossed.
Correct.
If
Yeah,
it's
that's
under a no
that's the
vote.
proposition language itself. So if Proposition
So
1
somebody
fails, and
could-
Proposition 2, so essentially the vote process itself.
Yeah.
They can
Right, but we
any
don't-
voter can decide to vote on one.
You can
both,
vote no
one
on
or the
1, yes
other.
on the 2, if you want to, but at
Well,
the
we
end of the
don't know
day.
yet. She's gonna look into
Only
it, and
yes.
other towns have done that, so we'll see how others have managed it. If it can be, if there is something that the machine can do to prevent
we-
it, I don't know, but that's what
Would
has
we
to be
need-
looked into.
Would we need to do that? So it sounds to me like
Yeah.
we just look at the numbers for Proposition 1, and then if that passes, then we say, okay, what are the numbers for Proposition 2? So like, do we need to?
To go through the machine. I just worry about telling people that they can vote for, they have to vote a certain way to vote on another proposition. Like that feels, I'm sorry, that feels a little weird to me. I'm
I mean,
sure
it's
it's
been
not.
done many, many times in the area, so we'll have to see how they
Okay.
managed it, and
That's-
there might be
yeah, I'm
one
sure,
way
yeah.
better
And
than
I was gonna say
another.
that.
It's I mean, I always say, learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
And
And
take their errors and correct them for ourselves. So I think you can all look into what
But
can
if-
be done.
But I think
Sure,
it's, sorry,
Matt
Erica,
will.
I don't want to cut you off, but if there's a way, like as Matt's saying, you just look at the numbers, I think that's, if we could, that Occam's razors it in a way, so.
Does the mechanics important though? If you left the first one blank, that's not a vote at all. That is allowable in the current machines, as I know. I mean, I'm with Joyce wondering about, could it be backed out to say, hey, one was left blank, you need to fill that out one way or the other. I don't know
But-
if that's important or not.
But wouldn't we just still be looking at the numbers? So if 10 people vote and 8 people say yes on Proposition 1, and 1 person says no and 1 person abstains. And then we're looking at Proposition 2 and 10 people voted and 7 say yes and 3 say no. Does it matter that there was an abstention for the first one? Like, I guess I just feel like if we're just looking at the numbers, we're saying yes or no, and then yes or no, not dependent.
So in the grand scheme of things, probably not. I mean, I agree, but I think just in terms of the purpose for tonight, and we did talk about this, you know, we have time to research and change it, make nuances so that it is clear as it possibly can be. I think our goal for tonight is to decide, you know, how to inform the district in terms of moving forward.
So that would be the next step. So these are just the sample propositions, but the next part, if I may move forward with the agenda, would be to go to the discussion and action in a board resolution to instruct me, in this case the superintendent, on our next steps. And there's draft resolution 1 and draft resolution 2 to talk about.
In summary, is it simply, we're really deciding, I mean, as Joyce pointed out, once we generally decide, the board doesn't change, so we're pick between one of these two. But essentially, though, we are instructing you, right, your team, how much time and effort to spend. If it's 1, it's only going to be on the buildings. If it's 2, it's also the buildings and the track then, which means architectural design, so it does mean additional funds, right? Yeah, the seeker, whatever, but it expands the scope, and so that's what we're authorizing, the move forward with additional time and resources to make 2 happen.
Yes.
Okay. And I think mechanics, these are both in the agenda, right? So you were saying we have some mechanics here of.
I think we want to do we still want to
discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, no, right. I'm just trying to think of how we're going to go about.
It says it right on board docs, what we gotta do. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, I just didn't know, yep, so, yeah, I just didn't know if we wanted to have more discussion of providing direction for the district. Absolutely recognizing and understanding that we need to look at the language for what it will look like on the ballot, look at what other districts have done so that we are clear, but we'd have time if we wanted to talk any more about or ask questions.
So are we looking for any informal vote? I'm ready for resolution 2, personally, so, right?
So what we would need to do, yeah, so if Brett goes back, do we want to go back to the agenda? Or do you want to talk more about the next steps? So yes, like.
So yes, the next steps would be if there is a proposal or a favor for a resolution, you would have to withdraw
Yep.
the one that you are not in favor of.
So can I make a motion to withdraw resolution 1?
Second.
So Mary Caitlin, Brian, are you good, Pam? And, okay, and a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
And I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2.
Second.
Brian, Peter, all in favor of adopting resolution 2?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
That's helpful.
Good. Let's move forward with the track.
That was it.
Get on the ballot and get people out to vote.
Yes, so just to clarify, on our agenda, we changed it up, so I think we're all in favor of giving our community the option to add a track.
Yeah.
So, yay, but I will, maybe I shouldn't cheer.
I just want to say, and I'll be very honest with this, and I know I'm not alone at this table. My February or March self would be very surprised that I was voting yes. And it was not, again, it has nothing to do with my understanding that we need a new track. I was very nervous about this. But I listened, and I think it's such a good lesson in it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to learn. It's okay to listen. It's okay to come up with a new perspective. And these kids who have spoken to us in the last couple weeks, they deserve all the kudos in the world because their sentiments really helped me better understand the importance of this. So I really hope they're giving themselves a pat on the back. They did an amazing job. So thank you for your leadership. I think you've convinced 7. Now you just have what,
All the rest.
17,000. So good luck. I hope.
And I have to second Jan. February Mary Caitlin would not have believed I got to this point, and it was hearing all of the stories of our families, and particularly hearing our student stories, and hearing a student say, "I wish we would not compete at home." Oof, like that hurts. You want to feel like you're proud of your community, and you want to be showing off to, what you can do, and showing off the best of Fairport, which I think we all believe in. So. Just thank you so much for the time and dedication you put forward, and the students, please thank them.
And
I
they'll all
don't
be old
think the
enough to.
students
And
could
it,
have had a better lesson in democracy.
Yes.
They really lived it in the
And they'll-
last few weeks, so good for them.
and they'll all be old enough to vote when this is. Many of them will be old enough to vote in August, in October. So.
And it was so impressive that they were all here knowing they aren't going to run on that track.
Yes. That was the
That was going to be my next comment. Just
Yeah.
most of the students I interacted with are either graduating or juniors, so they know, but they're looking out for younger generations. So
I know.
So
it
would
was
it-
like, well, that's what we really want Fairport to be, and they were.
What an example of brotherhood, sisterhood.
I know. I hope they do get to come back and run on the first lap, though, if this happens. So.
But we have lots of work to do.
I was just gonna say
this
that.
this will force me to make another timeline. Yeah. So we're excited to get that clarity, and I know this will be a topic as we move along. And I appreciate the clarity from the board and the participation from our community.
and knowing that hopefully this will get passed and we can move forward with other projects that we know a lot of our community members feel strongly about improving upon. So we'll need your support to get people out. Start working. I need a motion to enter into executive session for matters related to the performance and evaluation of members not in a collective bargaining group. Peter, Mary Caitlin, all in favor? Aye. And you are all free to go. And I think I should mention, even though it's not a board meeting, we won't be coming back with video after. We'll resume our session and then adjourn from there. So goodbye to those of you at home.